try to tell you something about this, okay? By the way, this is interactive, so if you feel you have any questions or anything that I think I can answer, please ask, okay? Is anyone aware of what CASBs are, or some of that, sorry?
Firewall in the data, in the internet for the data
Yeah, sort of,
governance.
yeah. It's a joke.
Cloud access security program.
Yeah. So essentially, everybody, like in our company, I'd like to tell you a little bit about why we looked at CASBs and so on and so forth. We are actually about 30 to 40 companies globally across 180 countries, disparate kind of networks, fiefdoms, and all of them work differently. As a company, we've gone completely digital, well, pushing digital to go at least 8%, I don't know if you're going to reach that, within the next year into the cloud, and it's going full force. So we have to have very good controls. CASB just happens to be one of them. There are many other parts, we have SecOps, and all the other stuff that's going on. So we looked at CASBs about a year and a half ago and started evaluating what they can or cannot do. Each of them have different features. Many, like any vendor, they tout everything. We tend to test it. Some of our, depending on who's doing it. But the security architecture and engineering group of us is one of three in the company. We really go deep dive and evaluate whether it can meet our needs. Because one of the gaps actually around all over the industry, besides lack of resources, is being able to sift through what's important and isn't. So we are now going into automation so that we can take the important stuff and as well as orchestrate, okay? So we looked at CASBs. There were a number of companies we looked at, but just to lay a level playing field, I can literally cut through some of these slides if it's not necessary. But I'll be going through the overview, cloud security in general, just one or two tidbits and all that stuff. Talk about CASB and how you try to evaluate if you ever went that path, okay? There's a lot of jargon, by the way, in the industry, and you hear that digital, it's all digital. The other thing is AI. And I want to tell you this, a lot of it is jargon. Many companies tout it, but they talk about algorithms and so on and so forth in artificial intelligence. But the algorithms are not the important stuff. It's the data that you collect and how you curate it, and the algorithm can work.
Models.
That's 101 of all the stuff that you hear, and that's the differentiator between most artificial intelligence. But by the way, a lot of this stuff that you see, and I'd urge you to go to this the Cloud Security Alliance, do a Google search CSA, or become a member. And you can they have a certification, but there's a lot of stuff that you learn, and they are a driving force. A lot of companies have joined them, just like in the old days, the IEEE and so on and so forth. They come up with a lot of good ideas, standards, controls, and how to remediate things, because things are happening. It's only a question of time when you be attacked and so on. So from anyway, this is the NIST. The NIST model is also there in the CSA, but you have, I might not go into the full definition, but private means it's private to you. It's not really, cloud is not really a fantastic new concept. It always existed, it's just renewing things. Community, it's for the community, and public as we know it, like our Office 365, and I'll get into that. And within that, what's important to know is, I can use this.
It doesn't work on the screen.
Oh, it doesn't, okay. You have SaaS, PaaS, and IaaS, okay? So those are the three things to know when you're evaluating. These are just things about the cloud, why people go to the cloud. You don't want to maintain hardware by yourself. You don't want to maintain patching and so on, and therefore you bubble up to the cloud and give it to the vendor so you can focus on the stuff that you have to. There are pros and cons, so that means you don't control it, and so on. So and by the way, feel free to ask because these are pain points that we went through, okay? So, like I said, it's important to understand what SaaS, PaaS, and IaaS is. And from it, I try to put pictures together, okay? From an IaaS perspective, it's basically the hardware abstraction and the connectivity by itself. And usually, the sysadmins and all deal with this layer. From the PaaS side, it's usually developers because this is where the operating system, the web interfaces, and so on, the programming tools, and all exist. And the last layer, which is most common and most people associate with cloud, is the SaaS, the actual services such as Office 365. And I try to put some arrows there, but it tells you what kind of things are in that area. And most cloud providers provide all this stuff in different flavors. But for those who are not deep into how the cloud works, and if you hear about Amazon Cloud, Microsoft Azure, and so on and so forth, you might think it's all there, but there's a lot of changes. It's in a state of flux. So if you actually went to the cloud and tried to configure stuff, well, you see this month, but it's slightly changed next month, and therefore it's important. It's incumbent upon us to actually be very cognizant of all this thing that's happening because it's fluid. I don't care who says it, but it's absolutely. It's always better to use a native security thing, like say Microsoft has a thing. It's always better, but they too change. That's why you have to have these other controls to validate and to at least be aware of where to handle things. Okay. Tell me if I'm going too fast. By the way, let's start. I just took this again. This is from the CSA. If you do CSA 12 Treacherous, by the way, this is a hyperlink. So they have some really nice. And the reason I'm pointing in this direction because the way I educated myself is into getting into these Cloud Security Alliance and understanding how they do things, like what they've done. And I use this. I'm using this as an example. They take each of these and they, like say if you looked at LinkedIn and it says it has a weakness here, account hijacking, it tells you exactly how to do what controls you put in place and what exactly you have to do to mitigate and so on and so forth. And it's an education by itself. If you did nothing else, you'd learn a lot from this, the Cloud Security Alliance. I think the cloud in general is here to stay, if only because there's a lot of stuff happening. You know, when companies move, there's an event, because us as a company, I can speak again for myself, we've hosted around the world, and some of it is outsourced in outsourcing companies. Once we put it into the cloud, the thing is in the cloud, but then it's the contracts between us and the big cloud providers. And by the way, contracting is an important thing in cloud, because if you put keys or if you encrypt, it's important that you manage those keys, so you don't have the provider hold those keys and all those things. That's why contracting is a big thing. People look at it like even in our company. And by the way, you need to look at your suppliers as well. If your supplier uses a cloud service and we're using this cloud service, all those things have to be really thought through. It's important, and a lot of this good stuff is also in the CSA, okay? I'm telling you, because otherwise it's good practice itself. And for us, people talk about compliance. Compliance obviously is usually just having good controls. We are involved with we have the FDA thing because we manufacture. We have GDPR, and plus all the privacy pods around the world, and PCI and HIPAA. You name it, we probably dealing with that. So I just put this to tell you that these were some of the studies that were done, and it's actually good work and it's good reading. So now let's get into, typically in security, you want to look at you want to be able to know how to, you would want it to be visible. You need proper governance, threat protection, compliance, and information security. And these are your cloud services, for example, and issues, right? How did this work? Yeah. Where do CASBs come in? What do CASBs really have? They are a combination of next generation firewalls, gateways, web gateways, SIMs, malware prevention, because all of them have features, not all CASBs, by the way, if you don't know, there are many CASBs, each of them tout differently in many companies, like firewall companies, all of them are jumping that battle area where they tout. Proofpoint has its own, Palo Alto has its own, Fortinet has, and then you have the other ones like Netscope, SkyHigh, Symantec, and so on and so forth. But in a nutshell, CASBs have those functionality. So when you're evaluating, which I'll show you in a bit, you've got to keep track of what are your objectives, what are your goals, and so on. And to do that, it's important because many a time, if you were just influenced, you have to think like a hacker or an engineering person. If you just listen to good salespeople, they'll tell you anything you want to hear until you actually have to implement it and get that stuff. Okay, so anyway, that's there. Here I've tried to put a story behind, but it's not a good picture, but it's some picture. This is us, for example, the offices around branches, remote users, and so on and so forth. In this area is the CASB. The CASB is really a broker between you and the cloud, okay? So you have this CASB that has the, linked up into your single sign-on, privileged access and so on. By the way, that's a configuration thing. And then CASBs have relationships between SaaS, PaaS, and IaaS of different providers of, like the AWS. By the way, this is only a little educational. I bet some of you know this and 10 times more. Let's say in Azure or Office 365 and so on and so forth. That is owned by the company. But then you have to worry about other things like, what about social media? What about the web? What about your shadow IT? The term shadow IT, for those who are ignorant, you know what it is, right? Is people just, if you don't have it, you just start using it. That's the IT that exists without IT, the corporate IT ever knowing that it exists, okay? That's a term. And what about your partners' cloud services, as well as your personal, because I can have Office 365 at home for my own personal use, and then I have my Office thing, okay? But Office stuff. But to know, and the reason I'm telling you this is it depends on what the modes of how CASBs work and how you may decide or decide not to use it, and so on and so forth. So the first thing to do, and I'll explain that in a later slide, is you want to get a handle of what is going on in your network, okay? But there's an aspect of this where if I'm at home, I'm in the office, I'm routing, so things will be routed through the CASB. What happens when I'm at home? I'm not really routing, but there are ways of solving that problem. So the first thing, typically, what you do is you get into the log-based discovery. What these CASBs do is when you'll read all the logs from all your firewall, your egress points. I use firewall logs, but there are all kinds of logs. And you try to discover. The good thing is you don't need an agent for that. It'll at least provide you some kind of baseline of what's happening in your network around the world. It doesn't tell you what's happening at home, but at least it's telling you this stuff, right? It's agentless, you don't have to put anything on your laptop. It's passive, it's only related, and it's device independent. So you'll discover what you have. That's the first step. The next thing is, which is most common, what we call API. It's near real time, it's not real time. What this is these CASBs have relationships with the cloud providers like AWS and all these other, Amazon and so on. They have relationships in such that they'll do a configuration, and once you set it up, they'll say, okay, between Estee Lauder, for example, and Azure, which is the Microsoft thing, okay, whenever you go to Office 365, they've got an API call here, either they pull or the SaaS provider, whenever they do a major change, they'll tell back. Okay, so that's where API, so they'll be well known. The disadvantage of that is there are only so many things that relationships might exist. There might be some clouds that these CASBs might not have. For example, it could be Ali Cloud in China, which is actually a big provider, but maybe that CASB doesn't have a relationship with it, and so on and so forth. And the application, so it's either a callback or there's some regular polling to find out what's changed. So it's near real time, but it gets that information. And thereafter, it can do certain things. It say, okay, now I know that you're doing this, or you sent some files and so on and so forth. You can encrypt and do certain things. And that's called API integration, and it's important to know that. But for that to happen, you can only deal with what corporate owns. You cannot deal with your personal stuff. You cannot deal with because you cannot control. It's this relationship within your corporate and Azure and the CASB, because that's your own. You can't deal with anything else because you have no control over that. So then comes in forward proxy. What a forward proxy, like I said, these are API calls. The first one that I spoke about was API calls. Either it polls or the cloud stuff tells the CASB, and therefore it can find out information about people. The next thing comes is forward proxies. Now, it could be with an agent. In my opinion, it's nice to have agents, because that's if it's not, you don't have too many agents. The reason is, even if things are encrypted, you can read it because it's right at the endpoint. You can read things through. But so what this tells you, it tells you everything, and there's an advantage of agents, by the way. And tell me if I'm losing you. Because you got an agent here, you can read everything as long as you got an agent that is going out to the through being proxy. So you can read stuff going to your personal, if it's on your laptop and I'm gone home, and even to you get all that information. Because now you don't have to deal with that relationship, because you've got that information, and you can do stuff. Like I can protect data leakage. And by the way, data leakage is a big thing that's used with, or you can encrypt, you can tokenize, and so on and so forth. But not some of the off. Yeah, that's why. But if you're off network, you need to install an agent. Works with browser and native apps, so some of it seems obvious. There's another one which is called forward. Supposing your company is averse to putting an agent on your machine. Many of these CASBs provide a reverse proxy. A proxy is like going through something, any proxy, to get to wherever it wants to. A reverse proxy comes the other way around. But for that to happen, you need to, the CASB is always playing catch up, and I'll tell you why. It seems like a good thing because you don't need an agent, but the thing with that is, whenever, say, a user wants to get to some sanctioned place, right, without agents, the moment he tries, the CASB does some magic behind. What it really does, it goes to your identity provider and reverses everything, and then so that you automatically. So even if you try to go directly, it'll somehow, through your identity, get back to the app. It has some good things, but then for that to happen, the CASB has to rewrite a lot of those web interfaces and so on and so forth. Okay, so that's in a nutshell. The reason I've told you this, and by the way, I've told you this because it's important to understand how to evaluate. Okay, and I've got only 5 minutes. So, the way we did our evaluation, we took out business drivers, security drivers, and operational drivers, and it's important to look at it that way. Merged them up, came out with what we thought 2 or 3 vendors, CASBs, did a proof of concept and scored them, okay? So the first thing, what do you mean? Sometimes it's important to know what your roadmap is as a company and match them up with what the vendor does, okay? It's, if I'm not, the other really good important thing is the references, because they'll tell you something, you have to speak to people without them without the vendor in place to understand exactly how to do things. You can ask very pointed questions and know whether they're lying or not. But how they're licensing and deployment, that is important because you need to know how you're going to pay for this stuff. You can do your financials if you're up to it, how much it's going to cost, what's your return on investment by deploying, so on and so forth. And is it simplifying your product suite by consolidating a number of things, okay? After you got your business drivers, you've got to make this requirement. By the way, these are in parallel, business, security, and operational. From the security, you need to say what you're protecting. All the security stuff, your attacks, is it helping with your privacy, your intellectual property, and so on and so forth? Can you collect your audit logs for auditors, and so on? What kind of modes are available? Remember I said API, proxies, and so on. And can it be input into your SOC, if at all, okay? From an operational, you have to look at it, is it easy to use? Is ease of use? Is it a cloud-based console, or do you have to maintain the console? These are important things because people are going to the cloud, so they have less to deal with things like, maintaining a piece of hardware, that's gone obsolete, how do you change stuff, and so on. Is it centralized? Now for us, for example, we work in China, Russia, Germany, all the stuff that my friend here does a lot here for the military, but we work with all these companies, right? So sometimes you need to keep things local without coming to the cloud. So does that vendor have multiple consoles that eventually link up together? Or in terms of privacy, does it tokenize stuff before it puts it into the cloud? So that's one. And the other things are integration, what kind of reporting, how training is. I'm speaking well, hopefully I'm speaking fast, but she told me I've got only 5 minutes there. And then what we did, after we got all that stuff, these are all, you're going to do like a paper-based, I call it paper-based, but you're checking all this stuff without really testing it. You're first looking at your NSS lab reports, because they do some kind of independent testing as well. Gartner, I don't care too much about Gartner, because sometimes I think there's money involved. That's my opinion. Because I've seen them do stuff. Okay, but then when I say Gartner, I mean in general when you get into the whole other stuff. But that's why you look at independent. But you take all those, because somewhere, you're going to start somewhere, and you have to start with a bunch of vendors, and then come back with, I'll score them in my own method or whatever method you have. What kind of false positives? This is important because they might say, oh, we're trapping everything, but there's a lot of false positives. You don't want to deal with that. And look at their demos and all that. Do your own research of your network. Pick up 2 or 3 vendors, and then set up a clear plan. To do that, then we do a real proof of concept where we actually take them live and put them. So the critical areas I spoke to about is the deployment modes. That's important. Whether you're doing API, whether you're doing API, forward proxy, reverse proxy, because sometimes you don't want agents, so that's the only way of working, and you live with that risk. What kind of coverage they have. This is important. This is relationships of the CASBs versus the applications they have on those cloud services. What kind of use cases? You should know what your use cases are, or your future forward pointing versus what they have. What kind of visibility, cloud discovery. From a security perspective, you look at your compliance, DLP controls, threat protection, and so on, whether they can encrypt, what kind of information they can give you on the spot, and this to me is also, for us it's very important, is the integration with other, so does it integrate with your intelligence, with your endpoint and other tools? These are important things. Nowadays the trend is to get to because one thing can say something else and the other one, so you got to make sure that the intelligence is shared and what kind of intelligence feeds. So what we did, besides all the other thing, I'm going to show you this. I hope you can read this, but you put whatever your capabilities you're looking. In my case, it was about 200 different capabilities I was looking at, and features. You'll see this in all over. over the place in explanation of what they meant. You'd have a priority in terms of high, medium, low. Isn't a high priority for your organization, like in the military, it might be different for us than for us at Estee Lauder. And then what the product is, because you're comparing it to various other products. But you also put a score, because you might have a fantastic score on a medium kind of priority to you. So it might mean nothing, or it's a low priority. Or it's something that is such a high priority, and that product has a score of 1 or something, you know? So it's important. Then you score them down, and so on. Okay? Since I got 1 minute. So you start off with this discovery. I don't have time to try to talk as fast as I can, but you just do your discovery, check when you're first starting with your deployment. Coach uses how to think and so on. But even the gentleman, somebody spoke about DLP and all that. Some of it you can make it, more easy to, as soon as it pops out, so that it's contextual. Then you safely enables only sanctioned applications. That's where you probably want to start for the SAS, PAS, and IAS, adaptive, granular, blah, blah, blah. And then deal with the unsanctioned, okay? The reason you want to deal with the unsanctioned, because most of it is, and then you can do the blocking and so on and so forth, and that's the way the world is. So.
Question.
So what do you go with?
That was
I'm
my
not
question
supposed to
too.
be selling.
I'm not asking you to sell, I'm just saying based on how I'm testing.
Okay,
I'm testing now, I'm leaning in the direction, I'm just
okay.
trying to figure out.
Tell me which one have you.
Proof point.
Okay, we went with Netscope. Proof Point, when I checked them out at that time, they were not even ready. And I'll tell you, one thing
How
that,
long ago was that?
this was about 1.5 years. We were thinking of Sky High. Sky High is stronger on the API side, and they claim other things, but we tested foolproof and kind of stuff. Netscope, we found them very agile, and they're doing a lot of things. They keep adapting stuff, and they work with our endpoints. There were a lot of other, like I said, when I had 200 points that we were doing, we use Proofpoint for other things, so it would have been easy for us.
That's why I'm looking at it, it's an easy integration.
But when you're looking at something as a company, right? We wanted to see, does it allow us to have multiple, when I didn't speak about DNS redirection. In China, we have to work very differently, and they are inspecting all our stuff. We keep our stuff local. We needed to have areas where we keep things local. Russia is another place. So we wanted to have that, that complex stuff, managed. Many CASBs can't do that.
And Netscope has the Juniper firewall devices. A lot of the leads come from Juniper.
I don't know where they come from, because we are not a Juniper shop. We Palo Alto and all the other stuff. For us, we don't care who they deal with. We want to see that it works for our environment, and we'll test it. We'll even check timings. We didn't take for example, the web gateway. You hear a term called, for the web, URL they've used different terms, URL filtering. We don't use that for us, because for us, we have to keep that locality of a country in its same space. Most of these web gateways, they go through 1 or 2 or 3, depending on where their location, their data centers are. Not all of them own data centers, some of them borrow data centers. And what happens is, first of all, you lose time. Regardless, you have to go through the cloud. The other thing is, they say it's in, I'm using Germany or Belgium, wherever, they want to have it in their local language, but when it goes, traverses, it becomes, English. It cannot be that way. For us, it's important to have the one-touch feel of, the country itself. There are many other aspects, including fact files and all that stuff.
A question, how do you deal with migrations? Some application don't have CASB, and right now all of a sudden they start to move to CASB, and how to work along with your DOP policy, because the business requirement my company has
PCI
is the DOP,
Yeah.
the data governance. CASB, the whole idea is to support your data governance policy standard. So it doesn't matter on premise or on the cloud, it's consistent policy across the board. And that's the beauty of, that's basic requirement before.
Yeah, the good thing about most CASBs, it's not only Netscope, they have templates, by the way, to help you, but it's still, you have to do some work.
But migration, I'm talking about, because we are doing the pilot right now, we go with the Symantec. And
Yeah, we looked at Symantec, but these guys, we found them, one of the business things is also responsiveness or how support. Because we are spread out, and we've outsourced as well. So that whole translation takes sometimes forever. We need to solve a problem which is now sort of thing. How, you said if they don't have a relationship with an application, right?
Yeah, something like how did you deal with an end user and they don't have a CASB before application, and right now we start to add a new security control between. Do you need to deal with any user, like a user experience, how to deal with that migration?
We have a whole user experience group, but one of the big things, right, you have that discovery phase. That is not touching anything, it's only telling you. So if, say, you're going to YouTube all the time, for example, we'll know exactly how much you're using and all that stuff. So then you put controls. Obviously, for anything, depending on how big the company is, and you need policies in place because there's legal implications too, and all that stuff. You can discover without, so it's more like a monitoring mode before you start implementing. I'm making it sound rosy, it's tough still. You need to get into that whole education.
Isn't that just general change management and knowing what countries and what cultures you operate
Yeah.
with? Because you can do a heck of a lot more to an American employee than you can to a German
Yeah.
or another nationality. In
Yeah,
terms of-
absolutely.
No, seriously, in terms of employee privacy. and
Yeah,
expectations.
exactly. So.
And it also depends on the corporate culture. Some companies are very highly regulated and locked down, and others are much more open and academic. So take that into account.
Yeah, so there's a whole bunch, and it's educational and it's cultural too. So, and for us, it's like all over the world. So each of, you have fiefdoms, we treat European parts of the company slightly differently because of privacy things, GDPR. But there's Asia and there's South America that also have strong